So welcome those joining the event just now. It's lovely to see your faces arriving in. We're really excited about this event this afternoon on activism and eco-spirituality. So welcome. This event is part of the Heart Shift, which is an aspect of the Leeds Festival of Kindness, Compassion and Wellbeing. So it's really fantastic to see the energy that was created in the Leeds Festival continue in these ongoing events, both Leeds Catalyst events and now in the Heart Shift events that my colleague Josh has been working on coordinating. So I'm Flo Scialom. I work as the communications manager at the Network of Wellbeing, and I'm just going to be playing a kind of supportive facilitating role today. So just kind of helping everyone get settled in before I hand over to our formal host, Professor Chris Baker. Chris is the William Temple Professor of Religion and Public Life at Goldsmiths, University of London, and Director of Research at the William Temple Foundation. And so we're really excited to have him as the host for this event. And for those that don't know, the William Temple Foundation is a research think tank dedicated to the vision of Archbishop William Temple, who coined the phrase the welfare state actually. And his ideas really continue to inspire the search for a just, flourishing, religious and secular society and a future of sustainability. So really great to have you hosting this event, and I'll hand over to you to share a bit more about the context for this event, Chris.
Thanks, Flo, and hello everyone. Lovely to see you, and welcome from a kind of a grey North London here in Stoke Newington. It's a great pleasure to be able to welcome you to the first of what we hope will be a series of webinars where we aim to explore the contours of a new politics, a new activism, and a new spirituality. So we're bringing all these things together in a conscious kind of dialogue with each other. And I say new, but of course, as I'm sure will become clear as we journey through this seminar or webinar and the rest of the series, what we think is new is in fact very old. In fact, is ancient. And I think I have come to the realization that the sheer depth of the challenges that are facing us means that we have to drink very deeply from ancient wells, wells that we associate with philosophy, religion, theology, spirituality, whilst at the same time blending them with the energy and the spirit of urgent radicalism and the call for justice, which we are seeing being expressed currently in grassroots movements like Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, and of course, Extinction Rebellion. As Flo said, my name's Chris Baker, and I'm Professor of Religion and Public Life at Goldsmiths and Director of Research at the William Temple Foundation. And I think I'm very blessed to have such two jobs that kind of do the same thing. So both jobs require me to not so much explore what people believe, but how they believe, and how that belief, how those beliefs, values and worldviews influence the way they act, because that in turn shapes the structures and institutions that surround us. And at times like this, you hope that the collective will to act as so many different people based on their values and beliefs can act as a tipping point. And it seems to me that we could be at that point now, but and if not, we desperately need to be soon, where we create a tipping point towards reimagining society along the lines of interconnectedness, our interconnection with each other and our planet, and the values of dignity and respect. These are foundational, it seems to me, but we need to reimagine them in a new way. And just a quick plug about William Temple. His book, Christianity and Social Order, reimagined what society would look like after the Second World War. He died in 1944. But in that book, you've got the contours of what became the universal and comprehensive welfare state, which Beveridge, of course, took forward in his report. And at the William Temple Foundation, we're trying to explore what theological and philosophical ideas can say to us today. How are they landing in the public space? And in particular, we're interested in the relationship between religion, theology, spirituality, and the digital and environmental world in which we're now living in. The challenge of the digital and the environmental catastrophe that we're facing. Some of this work we publish in a free to download essays called Temple Traps. So please visit our website to find out more, and I shall put our website up on the chat box in a minute. So to turn to today's event, we are very pleased to have two very inspiring, courageous, wise, and hugely experienced voices who are going to guide us through some of these debates. It was my privilege to hear both our speakers contribute to a panel on deep adaptation at St.Ethelberga's a few weeks, I think, before lockdown. I was physically present, so it must have been before lockdown. That event has stayed with me ever since, both haunting me and inspiring me. And I can think of no better people to guide us through the questions that we will be addressing today, which are: what are the challenges of the time we are in? What change do we want to see? And what is our responsibility and the role of faith and civil society in these changes? So I'm going to hand back to Flo now, who will formally introduce our two speakers. Thank you, Flo.
Thank you so much, Chris, for framing the series, the Heart Shift series and this event so effectively. And I'm just about to hand over to our first speaker, Justine, but before I do so, what we'd really love to do is get a bit of an insight of the audience joining us today and your views on kind of the relationship between activism and spirituality. So I'm just briefly going to share a poll with you guys, which hopefully you'll see on your screen now, just asking, do you see spirituality and activism as connected? Now, obviously, we've got you likely are here because you're intrigued by the connection, but it will be really interesting to see whether you see them as strongly connected, partly in some ways, or not really or not at all, or whether you're unsure, and actually that's why you've kind of come to the event today to find out more. So I'll just leave that poll open for a few more seconds, and then I'll share the responses from the group with you guys. So there we go. So there you see that a lot of the participants on this call, 76%, see spirituality and activism as strongly connected, and some partly in some ways. So that's really great. Thank you for sharing your views briefly. We'll love to go a bit more deeply into your views in the breakout rooms later, but for now I'd love to hand over to Justine, who is our first speaker. So Dr. Justine Huxley is the CEO of St.Ethelberga's Centre for Reconciliation and Peace, and St.Ethelberga's builds community resilience for times of ecological and social emergency. Their work is really rooted in 4 core principles, which are putting values into action, seeking opportunity in crisis, building community across differences, and protecting what is sacred. And I know many of you have likely heard of the work of St.Ethelberga. It's really inspiring, and it's wonderful to have Justine with us here today. So I'll hand over to you, Justine.
Thank you so much, Flo, and thank you so much to Josh and to Chris for inviting me to be part of this. It's always an honour to be invited to speak on this kind of theme, and it's the theme that I obviously really love and warm to. And it's also great to be speaking alongside Skeena. Hi, lovely to see you again, Skeena. And to see a few familiar faces in the Zoom room, so kind of just waving to those of you that I know. Yeah, so these 3 questions. The first one, what are the challenges of the time that we're in? And I thought maybe it would be worth just describing the time that we're in before we talk about the challenges. And I know we're very used to hearing these long litanies of terrible things that relate to the times that we're in, but I've just kind of categorized the terrible things because I like to kind of organize myself in that way. So what do we mean by the time that we're in? I believe that we're really primarily, first and foremost, in a time of great dying. We're seeing our insect populations collapse. We're seeing extinction at a rate that's 1,000 times higher than in pre-industrial age. We're seeing huge dead zones emerge in our oceans. We're looking at soils that may collapse within 50 harvests. And we're looking at sea level rises, which could mean 600 million people are displaced in the near future. And we're obviously in the middle of a global pandemic caused by our own destruction of natural habitats, and one which is bringing us really face to face with disease and death on a global scale. So we're in a time of great dying. We're also in a time of great injustice, or a time where injustice is being revealed in new ways. So where the fruits of systemic racism are generating civil unrest, as Chris referred to earlier, and where the global south has been utterly plundered by the Western world to feed the greed of the global north, not just leaving people in poverty, but actually destroying their ecosystems and destroying their way of life, and failing to take responsibility for that, or even to see it or to name it. And we're living in a world where the richest 1% own, oops, my notes have just disappeared. Just bear with me. The joys of mobile phones. Hang on. Here we go. Yeah, that's back. And we're living in a world where the richest 1% own over half of the world's resources. So we're living in a time of great injustice. We're also living in a time of polarization, of this deepening culture war, these two tribes that are emerging in the Western world, the tribes that David Goodhart calls the anywheres and the somewheres, the people who have this global outlook, and the people who feel that multiculturalism has gone too far and is eroding what's precious in their way of life. We're living in a world where we demonize those with opposing viewpoints, where Trump, for example, is either a hero or the Antichrist, and the people who see him as the Antichrist can't have conversations with the people who see him as a hero. And, you know, the leavers don't understand the remainers and vice versa. So we're losing the ability to understand each other and to speak across these increasing divides. And we're unconsciously and very effectively ploughing and fertilizing the ground for fascism and for other forms of extremism. So we're living in a time of polarization. And lastly, but by no means least, and I think this is increasingly important, we're living in a time of untruth. We're living in a time when we don't know whether the news that we're reading is true or false, where our social media algorithms are kind of putting us into warped and limited versions of reality, and where conspiracy theories are creating this alternative paranoid reality, and where we're being distracted and drawn in to this kind of online illusory world in a way that can be extremely unhelpful. So if you put all of those together, a time of dying, injustice, polarization, and untruth, you know, it's easy to see that we're actually living at the end of a civilization. We're watching a worldview that's totally outlived its usefulness unravel around us. And in the same way that as the Roman Empire disintegrated and Europe was plunged into the Dark Ages, there's this increasing sense of distortion and imbalance that's becoming visible as the worldview that we're still rooted in makes less and less sense. And I think alongside that, there's a kind of insane arrogance and denial, like a real inability to grasp that something is over. So that would be my understanding of the territory that we're in. So what are the challenges of living in that landscape? And I just, obviously the challenges are many, but I just want to focus on two. So the first of those is the challenge of letting go. So with any cycle of death and rebirth, we can't be present to what is being born if we are still attached to and clinging on to what is old. And like, we know this from our own individual lives, when we're coming to the end of a particular life chapter, if we are still identified with it, we fight to hold on to it. We try and paper over the cracks that emerge, and we kind of fight our corner to kind of make something continue for longer than it really needs to. And we don't allow the grace that belongs to the beginning of what's new to really flow into our life. And like, sometimes we have to allow ourselves, sometimes maybe we can transition from one chapter to a new chapter in this kind of seamless and beautiful way, but that's not always the case. Sometimes we have to allow ourselves to be stripped bare and to step into a kind of wasteland, an emptiness, a barrenness, before we can allow what's new to emerge. And I feel that's the place that we are in collectively. I feel that what's required is a real courage to let go. We cannot remake this civilization. Maybe some ground has to be cleared, and that we have to step into a space of unknowing before what belongs to the new can come through. So what might it mean to let go? And perhaps part of what we need to let go of is deep-rooted attachments. Perhaps what some of us need to let go of is privileges and a sense of entitlement. Perhaps there's something about identities. What identities are we clinging to that actually make it harder to make that transition? And perhaps there's like a concern for the material. Even as spiritual people, perhaps we're still overly concerned with the material. And just as an individual who's dying or facing a terminal illness, or even just having a diagnosis, they don't know if it's terminal or not. Sometimes those individuals have to withdraw attachment to the physical body and reinvest it in the spiritual, to reinvest it in what's eternal. So maybe those things, those attachments, identities, privileges, expectations about the future, about what kind of life we could have had, those things might weigh us down in this transition and make us less agile. And maybe only the people who don't have that baggage can be agile and can survive. So maybe those of us who are prepared to sacrifice everything will actually get to participate in real regeneration and get to tend the seeds of the new that are emerging between that destruction. So that's the challenge of letting go. And for me, the second challenge that I want to name is the challenge of staying true. And we're being thrown around and battered by these outer events that are the dying of our civilization, these outer crises. So the pandemic, the wildfires, the economic challenges, the kind of extreme weather, and those events are getting more and more and more frequent. We all know that. We all know that. So we're getting thrown around by the outer circumstances of ending. And we're also being thrown around inwardly by this culture of distortion and untruth. So the lies and the fakeness and the superficiality and the weapons of mass distraction that keep us trapped in this superficial and illusory non-reality. And within that, there's a real challenge of like, how do we stay true? How do we find what is real and true and stay and hold fast to that? And, as Chris articulated earlier, where are these ancient wells that hold the sweet water of life from which real regeneration is possible? So the outer city can crumble, but maybe there are inner wells that won't run dry. How do we find them? How do we draw from them? What are we guided by? Where do we find nourishment and meaning in a world where so much is disintegrating? How do we find guidance and discernment? So how do we root ourselves in what is real and what is true? So this question, what change do we want to see? And I think, there are a million practical changes that it's easy to leap to those. We need to build resilience for what's coming, and ultimately we need to transform our way of life. So we need to redesign everything. We need to redesign our farming systems, our politics, our economy. We need to prepare ourselves for mass migration on a scale that we've never seen before. We need to make this huge commitment to radical degrowth. These are huge things, but I just wonder whether there's something that needs to come first. Whether if we leap to those solutions, something will get lost. So what is it that might need to happen first? And, a couple of years ago, someone taught me that the Greek word for crisis includes a reference to sifting, that crisis is an opportunity to sift what is important from what is inessential. And I feel if there is an opportunity, as Flo said earlier, one of St. Ethelberga's core values is to seek opportunity in crisis. And what I see as the main opportunity is, can we use this disintegration around us to go back to what is most essential? Can we look at what humanity is in danger of losing? Because we will need these values to navigate what's coming. And I think our values will be really severely tested in what's to come. So what are those values that are fundamental to human life? And can we make those the grounds of regeneration, so that we're not trying to recreate, we're not trying to sort of shift from this broken, distorted world into something new, but we're actually taking it back to what's essential and regenerating from that place. So, I just ask you that question. What does that mean for you? What's essential for you? Where do you find that deeper source? And what values do you see as fundamental to human life? Thanks, Flo. I've just seen your warning. Yeah, the time warning. So for me, ultimately, that's about love, and it's about the expression of love, which is often just simple kindness, and kindness that goes beyond kindness towards people who are like me, and that includes kindness towards people who are very different from me, or whose views I may find abhorrent, or kindness to different species, or kindness beyond even what I think of as alive or inanimate. A kindness that is unconditional and selfless, and as a response to the sanctity of life. And so this last question, the role of faith and civil society in this change. And for me, this comes down to leadership, because I feel that we're desperately in need of new forms of prophetic leadership, that is becoming very pressing and urgent. And within civil society, we have an abundance of altruism, people who deeply care, and people who are not driven by profit, like many people in the business world or many people in politics. In civil society, there are people who deeply care about humanity and about the earth. And also, if we look at faith, there are many resources within faith traditions that are incredibly relevant. So, for example, one would imagine that people of faith have a different relationship with death. Perhaps there's less fear of death. Perhaps there's more understanding of cycles of death and rebirth. Perhaps there's more knowledge of how to distinguish between what's fleeting and what's eternal. Maybe there are aspirations that go beyond the ego, aspirations that go beyond the material. And within the mystical traditions of every religion, there are these visions of what real interbeing looks like. visions that can be experienced, tools that can help us have those experiences. So within civil society, there are tremendous sources, potential sources of new kinds of leadership. And I feel, that new kind of leadership that we need, there are several different aspects to that. And firstly, to my mind, and I know some people really disagree with this, but to my mind, responsible leadership means to look at worst case scenarios, not to shy away from looking at the worst that can happen, as we aspire for the best, but we also prepare for the worst. And many people don't want to do that for obvious reasons, because it's scary and it takes courage. But I believe that we should be all looking at actually what is the worst thing that can happen, or what are the worst things that can happen in my lifetime and my children's lifetime and my grandchildren's lifetime. And then not just naming them, but actually being willing to imagine them, being willing to walk into that future and say, okay, how will that feel? How will that look? How will I live? What values will I draw from? To prepare ourselves for that, and to be willing to actually experience it somewhere, to prepare for it. And people fear doing this because they think that they will lose hope, or they will stop acting for change. But I really believe that actually you won't. What you will do instead is feel grounded in something that's realistic, and it will relieve anxiety rather than provoke it. And as one of our alumni said, this lovely phrase, which I really love, he said, what this deep adaptation work teaches us is that the monster you look in the eye is ultimately less scary than the monster that's hiding behind the wardrobe. So I really feel like we need to pull the monsters out of the wardrobe and look them in the face. And that way we can kind of ask this question, if that is the future we're facing, what matters and what doesn't? So we need this kind of, to me, that's what prophetic leadership is, actually. It's leadership that's grounded in something that's eternal, that's beyond our consensus reality. And as Rudyard Kipling said, can you keep your head when everyone around you is losing theirs? But can you speak truth to power? And can you not be beholden to anything beyond your own conscience? So prophetic leadership, responsible leadership, prophetic leadership, but also leadership that has the heart of peacemaking. We need to not just speak and not just bring with the people who are like us, but speak to people we disagree with and be able to bring those people, because there's so much challenge and stress coming our way. How do we build communities that will pull together across those divisions rather than fracture in the face of pressure? So, leadership that can't do that isn't worth anything. We have to be able to stretch across these polarizations. Thanks, Flo. Yeah, so just one more point. We need leadership that can call to other people into this place of moral courage. So how do we bring other people into this place of being rooted in our deepest human values? And I think it's really worth remembering that in Nazi Germany, which was not so long ago, ordinary human beings were drawn into a reality where they were able to perpetrate, inhumane and evil acts, and to justify it, and they were not different from us. Their values were eroded without them even realizing it, and we need leadership that can speak to that threat, and leadership that can be a light, that can root us in what's essential. And it doesn't matter how big or small your sphere of influence is. Everyone in this Zoom room is capable of prophetic leadership. And I believe that's really what's needed at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justine. I know it can feel strange sometimes to share on Zoom and then be met with a silence, but I see Sam's been to Zoom calls before, because you can give a reaction of a round of applause, or if you would like to place your hands together or show your appreciation to Justine for all that she shared, that would be wonderful, because that was a really powerful presentation. Thank you so much for sharing, and I really love, and I see it resonated in the chat box as well, this focus on prophetic leadership. I think that's really powerful. And just to mention, I saw a question come in from Mary in the chat box as well, and what I'm going to, if you have questions for Justine or Skeena, who we're about to hand over to, please do write them in the chat box, and Chris and also my colleague Josh will be keeping an eye on the questions coming in, and then after we've heard both of our speakers speak, we'll be having a Q&A section later in the event. So do feel free to write your questions in the chat, and we know that we will come to them later in the event. So now I'm going to hand over to our second speaker of today, and that's Skeena Rathor. So Skeena is the co-founder of the Extinction Rebellion DNA and the XR Vision Sensing Group, which is the spiritual and visioning centre of Extinction Rebellion. And presently she is leading the XR and Movement of Movements co-liberation project and campaign. She's also an elected councillor in Stroud District Council, and she's really passionate about this area of work. So we're really honoured to have Skeena join us today, and looking forward to hearing what she has to share.
Thank you so much, Flo. I'm noticing that listening to Justine, my heart has landed in my stomach, which is always a wonderful place to inhabit, a wonderful place to feel in my body. And I'm thanking you, Justine, for that feeling. I want to say salam, and because I was born into a Kashmiri Muslim family, and I want to say shalom because I married into a Jewish family. To you all, peace, essentially, to you and with you all. And I want to thank our ancestors. I'm so grateful to Chris for highlighting that which is ancient, and I have been thinking about my ancestors a lot recently, and I want to invite them, our ancestors, in today to being with us. That feels important during this time. I think we're here because of the love and the price they paid for their love. And I also want to invite in and thank the ancestors of all lifehood, and how much life wants to live in all the abundance that is. And I want to appreciate that, and invite that energy to be with us. Something happened today that I want to share with you, which is that I think I finally found a way to be in disobedience and for it to be recognized. So as you know, Extinction Rebellion is all about our withdrawing our consent from this harmful, violent human operating systems that we're all complicit and part of, right? And I'll share with you that my story, that in the first rebellion, my constructive disobedience was to dig up the centre of Parliament Square and plant a thuja, a plum tree, and a walnut tree. And I was surrounded, right, by probably about 2,000 people were blocking the entryway for the policemen to come and arrest me while I did this. And I was all up for arrest. I was really, I was very passionate, very, my whole body was pumping with the rightness and the feeling of being in my know and being in a place of congruence and truth. And so there I was, did the act, and then crawled out, because there was, it was heaving to 2,000 people. So I had to make my way. And at the same time, policemen were coming in, policemen and women were coming in to try and find the people that were doing this, me and a few helpers. And I was trying to make my way out to the police because I wanted to stand there and own up and be arrested. So I made my way out, and I happened upon a policeman and woman standing together. And he was very tall, the policeman, and the woman next to him, the policewoman next to him, just, you know, about my height. They both looked at me. I looked up at this policeman, and I offered my hands out, and I said, it was me. It was me. I just dug up, and I've just planted the trees, would you like to arrest me? And he looked at me and said, no, I don't think so. And I said, really, are you sure? And the policewoman smiled and she said, I think we're sure. And I just slumped. Justine's probably heard this story. I've told it a few times. And anyway, I've tried 3 more times since then. Not tried, but I've been in that position where I'm just, you know, I'm in a disobedience. The police have said to me, yep, you know, you're up for arrest, and then they don't do it. And this morning I decided we've got a new campaign called Money Rebellion, and I am in this position where they want me to pay back my student loan of, you know, however many years ago. And I've decided that through Money Rebellion, I'm going to move my debt, and I'm going to rechannel the money to global communities of care and resistance instead of paying the money back. And I'm going to be in contempt of county court judgment to do that. So this is a really special day for me, and I just wanted to share it with you all. And I want to tell you why, of course, because this is where my spirituality and my heart has taken me. And this is why we're here, to explore these questions. And so the why started with understanding, of course, the climate breakdown and hearing Jem at Cumbria talk about it. And what that meant for me was that I could see that it meant that my 3 children, I have 3 girls, they might not experience a full adulthood. I rushed home early from this event, shaking with understanding the science. And I couldn't help but tell my 18-year-old daughter straight away. I couldn't help it. And because she knew something was wrong, I'd come home early. And it took 2 weeks. It took 2 weeks. But what happened one day after 2 weeks is she was sitting in a rocking chair. And this is a really special rocking chair because it's where I breastfed all my 3 girls. And she was rocking and rocking. And she said to me, and suddenly, so she's rocking, suddenly she slides off the chair and lands on the floor and sobs. And says to me, she says to me, Mummy, you don't know what you've done. You've taken away my dreams. Everything I was longing for by telling me what you told me. And that was a moment of such intense grief, like I've never experienced. And that was why originally I moved from social justice work, and I helped to create what Extinction Rebellion is now. And I'm also telling you that because recently something has shifted. I'm just going to take a breath, actually, because Thank you. Thank you for being here with me. Something has shifted, and I've gone back or forward, maybe both, into this place of understanding how my survival, my thriving, my health, my everything depends upon everybody else's. And it can't be about my children's survival. Of course not. It can't be just that. Of course not. And it never was, but that was my original why, right? That was the moment. And I spoke to a friend called Andy Desmond who works in child trafficking. And he reminded me of the price, the cost of our lives. He reminded me of how the tension that he constantly feels in being paid to do a job that is about saving life, you know. It's about saving a child's life from slavery. And I've been working in this way with these questions of what is it that needs to change. Very much so within Extinction Rebellion, part of the visioning team is like, okay, what's the new story? What is it that we're reaching for, and therefore what needs to change?
5 minutes to go.
Thank you, Flo. Thank you. And there's so much, as Justine pointed out, there's so much that needs to change. But the thing that's been with me most recently is that this place, and I'm going to go to the other end of the spectrum from Justine. For me, right now, it's not letting go. It's fully attaching. It's intense longing. I read the other day, grief is the philosopher's stone that transmutes the lead of longing into the gold of union. I am in intense longing and intense yearning for the change. And I think that is what's become frozen in us. Within Extinction Rebellion, in the work, meeting people has been one of the most frustrating things, has been the block where people aren't feeling. They're not feeling their attachment, right? They're not feeling the grief. There's a frozenness, there's a frozen need. They're not feeling their love of life. They're not feeling their intense desire for themselves or their children. And my God, the anger, the frustration that fuels in terms of political resistance. We all know it, right? Justice work, political resistance. It's one of the fuels is this anger and frustration that, hold on. And Carol Snyder and Naomi Gilligan, they've written a book called Why Does Patriarchy Persist? And it talks about how we are born in healthy resistance. So we will resist any loss of relationship. Yeah, the 2-year-old will throw themselves on the floor and say, no way, this is threatening my loss of relationship. This is not good enough. And somewhere along the line, it becomes political resistance. We might do it sometimes. We might get angry sometimes and stand up and say, no, you know, I want this, I want relationship, I want life. And what happens for most of us is we go into what is called, what Naomi and Carol are calling psychological resistance and numbness and unfeeling. So for me, the way back is not in this present moment. And I know it's necessary to let go of all the things Justine spoke about. I know that they are all true. But in this moment, I'm thinking about my friend Jay Ramsey, who 2 weeks before he died, and it was 2 months before we launched, 2 months after we launched Extinction Rebellion. And I said to him, Jay, I don't know how we're going to do this. And he said to me, and I'll never forget it, because he had that light of someone who was dying. It was all around him. And by the way, his poetry is amazing. If you ever get a chance, Jay Ramsey. He looked at me and said, Skeena, it will be about setting people's hearts on fire. And the reason that chimes with me so much is because I know it's when my heart is on fire that I am able to be in my no, in my yes, in my healthy resistance, in my deepest longings, in my burning desires, in my eloquent rage. And I long for people to stand there with me. I long for you all to stand there with me. And I know he is right, because this will be about changing people's hearts, not their minds, not a fixing of a policy. The challenge is, can we reawaken and realign our hearts? Can we set each other's hearts on fire because we want so much to belong to each other again? Because we want so much from one another's hearts. Because we want so much more love than this world has made currently possible. Because we were born for love, because our ancestors were here because of love. And that's the challenge. And I want to invite us all to make more and more space for reawakening our desire, our burning desire for life and love. And we are working on it's called the Co-Liberation, Powerfulness and Leadership Project.
1 minute to go, Skeena.
Thank you. And I would like to, one of the events that I'm hoping to have is to have an event that looks at the uprooting of the patriarchal narrative and the project that is modernity and enlightenment, and pulling us towards the new story, the vision, right? What is, for me, I'm calling it, there's a huge unknowing, I'm calling it the Co-Liberation Project. And for me, the Co-Liberation Project is about liberating us for love, removing what Arundhati Roy has called the love laws that we are all stuck in, where we are told who to love and how to love them. So there's a story waiting to be birthed. There's a vision that we can all be part of co-creating, and I think this is part of the prophetic leadership piece that Justine speaks about so eloquently. It's how are we going to be part of creating the immense visionary culture for love. And I want to invite you to, if you're interested, please get in touch and join us in that endeavor. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Skeena. That was really, really beautiful, powerful sharing. And again, inviting everyone to show your appreciation to Skeena in reactions or hand gestures, however feels right to you. Yeah, really moving to hear your own journey that you've been on, and your invitation to everyone here to share in that. So we've got about 20 minutes left of this event together, and we really want to make sure to give you guys the chance to connect, and also to give the opportunity for you to ask questions of Skeena and Justine. So I'm just going to check in with my colleague Josh, whether we would like to go to breakout rooms now or directly to Q&A.
I think we'll go to breakout rooms, Flo.
Okay.
I'm going to try and make this work. If it doesn't, you can rescue me, I hope.
No worries.
So we're going to go into 6 breakout rooms now.
Brilliant.
And do we have questions for people to address whilst there?
So because we want to have a bit of time for Q&A at the end, these are going to be quite brief discussions. So just a chance to check in with others on this call and share, like, introduce yourself, reflect on what's been shared in the presentations. I'm just pasting into the chat these brief invitations for what you could share in the breakout rooms. So briefly introduce yourself, reflect on what's been shared, and if you have time, talk about how does activism and spirituality connect in your life and work. But perhaps, given that we're quite tight on time, you may want to focus on the first 2 points and just have a chance to connect with others in the event. So we'll have about just under 10 minutes in the discussion.
Okay. Oh gosh.
Welcome back from the breakout rooms, everyone. I hope that everyone enjoyed their discussions. I know it can always feel like there's a little bit too short a time in those breakout room discussions, and I know we had a really rich discussion that it could have gone on longer. But yeah, it's really nice to have the opportunity, hopefully, to even briefly connect with other people that are so engaged in this topic. So we're aiming to close in the next 10 minutes or so. So I think we're going to have time for 1 round of questions for Justine and Skeena, and then we'll move towards closing. But I'll hand over to Josh and/or Chris to maybe make some comments and share any kind of 1 round of questions for the speakers.
Thank you, Flo. I'm sorry it was so short, everybody, but we're trying to keep to time. And I'm also navigating various technical problems, one of which is that my chat box has disappeared. So I can't see any of the questions that were there. So I'm going to hand over to Chris. Hopefully you can share some of the questions and share them with Justine and Skeena.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Josh. So I mean, I think I can see 3 questions in the chat box room. One is related to leadership. So where does this kind of leadership come from? This kind of moral leadership that Justine was talking about, authentic moral leadership, which certainly is very lacking in the current context. There was a question from Mirella about how to transform fear and a sense of the overwhelming into action, into change. So how do we transform our fear, which can lead us to get very passive and kind of locked into ourselves, into something that feels overwhelming, into action and into change. So one is kind of what does leadership look like? 2, how do we kind of overcome our psychological inertia that's generated by fear? And then there's a long question from Chris, who I think is talking about the role of sacrifice in this. What does sacrifice look like in the context of what we're being asked to do?
Thank you, Chris, for summarising them so well. So maybe we can go to Justine for the question on leadership, and then over to Skeena for the second 2 questions on fear and sacrifice, if that works okay for you guys.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Yeah, really good question. So where do we find that kind of leadership, or where does it come from? And I think my kind of gut reaction to that is that, we're used to kind of looking for models of leadership elsewhere, like looking to role models and looking to other people to show us how it's done. And I feel actually for the kind of prophetic leadership that we need at this time, that is not going to work, because when you look around you on the global stage, you know, that the most powerful people in the world are certainly not modeling that kind of leadership. So my sense is that, like, I kind of go back, I belong to a Sufi tradition, and I kind of go back to the journey, the spiritual journey, which is to kind of, you know, take oneself away from one's conditioning through spiritual practice to make conscious and separate from one's conditioning, so that you can dig deeper into what is your authentic self and begin to manifest that in the world. And I feel like in the past, that kind of hero's journey has been very much an individual thing, whereas now we're in this collective environment where the kind of you know, the falseness of consensus reality and the addiction to material consumerism in themselves can be a kind of general, like we can look at this, how we're living, and actually take ourselves beyond that. Can we kind of break our addiction to consumerism? Can we kind of properly look at how broken the system is and use that in a similar way to the hero's journey, to actually go beyond, to detach ourselves from consensus reality and to actually find something that's deeper? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that where we source that prophetic leadership is in ourselves, is in our own journey to kind of free ourselves from what is false and deeply attach ourselves to and begin to manifest what is true. So I would say, don't look outside yourself for role models, but rather go inside and make that journey for yourself through what's dark and what's broken and what's false and what belongs to the ego, and into what's authentic for you. And then kind of, you know, ask from this deeper place that's beyond your own concern for yourself. Because, you know, if we try and do leadership while we're actually just trying to protect ourselves in some way, or even trying to protect our families or our loved ones, that isn't going to work. It has to be from this place where we're rooted in a sense of something, concern that goes far beyond us as individuals. So if we can ask from this place of like beyond self-concern, what can be our contribution, then we may find a very different answer, you know, and that answer will look vastly different for different people, and it may really break our idea of what leadership is, you know. So I think that would be my response.
Really powerful answer, thank you. And I can see that was resonating with people as well. So thanks so much. And over to Skeena for the second two questions.
Thank you, Flo. So fear, and okay, so my background is as a trauma therapist and healer. So I'm going to offer you a response from with that hat on, as well as trying to reach into what we are doing here, which is trying to explore the spiritual dimension of this. So when we are overwhelmed in fear, we have what's called the triple F response, right? We go into fight, flight, freeze. And what many studies are showing us is that most of us sit in a flight or freeze response. We are conditioned out of a fight response. Yeah. So, and in that flight and freeze response lies the numbness. Yeah. So, and the frustration of us as activists, because we come across the listlessness, the lethargy and the apathy that is in the numbness again and again. And it's like a fortress around people's hearts, is what I was trying to say earlier. But and for me, the way back, when we, and Extinction Rebellion are doing this, right? We are triggering fear all the time. We are saying, look, we are on the right, we're over the cliff, you know, some act now. This is an emergency. We are dying, as Justine said, we're in a dying, you know. How we hold people in that is absolutely crucial. Mirella, thank you so much for this question, because this is perhaps our responsibility for those of us that have been in fight And for those of us that actually want to get beyond even the fight and want to heal into healthy resistance, because actually healthy resistance isn't in fight, flight, or freeze. It's in going a new way. It's in living the values and the vision, right? So, but there's no point in us doing that in these little circles. Quite rightly, as you said, we need to make space for holding the fear response. We need to bring everything we have, everything we've learned, whether we are philosophy students, trauma students, theologians, or, you know, whatever care we're bringing into the world, we need to channel that and direct that at holding the mass fear response. So that would be my first, you know, kind of look towards answering that question. Sorry, Flo, what was the third question?
So Chris, maybe you could just repeat, it was around sacrifice and response to sacrifice, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, sacrifice, thank you. Oh, this is really rich. So is it sacrifice, or is it, again, just connecting with what has been lost to us, which is located in our mothering, in the mothering principle, for me? So when I say that, it's in it, man, woman, whoever you are, we all have an instinct of protecting and nurturing, yeah? And sometimes that instinct to protect will have to stand in the way of something. It's an upstanding position. There's no bystanding in protecting what you love. And is that really sacrifice? Did I really sacrifice my 20s and my 30s to breastfeed my children and bring them up in did I? Am I really sacrificing my liberty? Because what liberty do if I stand in the way on the streets of something? Because what liberty do I really have? We are in deep oppression, you know. So I'm tempted to kind of swivel that notion of sacrifice and say, actually, let's be in our mothering instinct and our feminine instinct to love and protect and nurture and grow and birth, you know. Let's do that together. There's no sacrificing that. There's just intense, again, back to intense love and, you know, yeah, being together.
Thank you so much, Skeena. Really, again, really powerful responses to those questions. So thank you as well to everyone for sharing kind of comments and responses and questions in the chat box. And sorry we won't get around to all of the questions today just because of time, because we want to start to move towards a close today of this event. It's been such a rich discussion and we have been recording it. So we're going to send you a follow-up email with the recording and links to from Skeena and Justine and more about the heart shift. But I'm going to hand over to my colleague Josh to kind of move us towards closing with any announcements.
Thank you, Flo, and thank you to both our speakers and to everyone who's joined us. This is a hugely important space, a hugely important dialogue, and I hope that we can all stay in touch and develop these ideas together in terms of regenerative practice and a more holistic and kinder world. You will receive an email, as Flo has said. We have a number of other events coming up which we'll send you details of on other themes within this space, such as theology and imagination, interfaith ecumenism and justice, environment and business, and civil society and power. So I hope you'll stay in touch and join us. And I'd like to invite Chris, Justine or Skeena, if you have any other events to announce now. If we don't have time, we can put those out in the follow-up email. And Flo, you might want to mention about the Network of Wellbeing webinar. So Justine, do you have any events that you'd like to share?
Oh, thank you, Josh. And yeah, I'd love to mention an event that's next Wednesday evening that's called Black Prophetic Attention. And it's with a personal heroine of mine who is Bronte Velez. And she works with kind of melting down weapons with kind of gang warfare in the States and kind of turning it into sort of shovels and planting trees with it. And she's an amazing young woman. And this is going to be about kind of public ritual around those things. So that's next Wednesday evening and it's on the St.Ethelberga's website. Thank you.
Thank you. I just would love you to all, if you're interested, to have a look at Money Rebellion and what we're trying to do through Money Rebellion. And also, I would like to invite you to be interested in the Co-Liberation Project and campaign. We're hoping to work deeply into the face of what systemic agreements and commitments can we make in the name of co-liberation, and it requires vision and everything that's been talked about here, values, purpose, but it requires actionable tasks and commitments. And I'd love to hear from you if you have ideas or a longing to be in that space. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chris, do you have any events that you'd like to share at the moment?
No, thank you. Just to draw people's attention to the temple tracks that I mentioned, and I sent a link through in the chat box. I think people hopefully find it very interesting and stimulating for the kind of thinking, supporting the thinking that we're doing at this event. Thanks. Thank you.
And Flo, do you want to share about our webinar that's coming up?
Sure, yeah, just very briefly,
leadership.
I'll put the link in the chat for anyone that's interested, but it's really resonant with some of the topics around leadership that have been discussed today. So we're going to be running an event on well-being women and leadership, but really it's open to men and women, and it's looking at, how do we embody this new kind of approach to leadership that has been discussed so much today. But we'll include the links to all of the events and things that have been mentioned, projects, etc., in the follow-up email. So keep an eye out for that follow-up email with the recording and links in your inbox. And thank you all so much. One final thing, it's lovely to have a screenshot of these events just to kind of share on social media and remember the occasion, so to say. So we'd love to take a screenshot of before we close now. If you wouldn't like to be included, feel free to turn your camera off, but it's lovely to have. And if you are enthusiastic about being included, feel free to wave or smile or thank you. Thank you very much. We'll just take a few and then we'll be good. So thank you so much. I think that's everything, Josh. But thank you. Thanks so much.
Deep appreciation again to Justine and Skeena, and thank you to everyone. Do stay in touch and let's move this space together, move this space forward together and this dialogue forward together. Thank you again.
Thank you. Goodbye.